Well, with the season over for Orange County, we enter our off-season mode where we're going to do some things. We're going to talk about the season, and in the coming weeks, we get to talk, do some grades, get to do our award show. That will be coming up. I know we haven't sent out the ballots yet, but you will see those coming out soon. Oh, hey, and there was a really big match this past weekend. I hope you all saw it. Tottenham destroying Man City. That was a nice big match we saw this weekend. Let's get into the show. Welcome to the Show of Champions. This is the Orange and Black Soccer Cast. How's it going, Orange County? Welcome to another episode of the Orange and Black Soccer Cast, the first and only show dedicated to Orange County Soccer Club, its fans, and supporters. I'm your host, Ray Zamora, and I'm going to take you through this wonderful journey as we discuss Orange County Soccer Club, along with some other things, apparently. Helping me out for this episode, we've got the person in Las Vegas that I know many of us were hoping to hang out with at some point, but it didn't happen. The magic of the USL playoffs didn't make that happen. That's Brad. Brad, how you doing?
I'm not bad. We had honestly some of the best games this season in this postseason. It has not disappointed, and congratulations to the West Coast champion. Also the league champion because it stays in the West again, Colorado Springs.
Yeah, I am not recognizing that championship, Brad. I'm sorry. Also helping me out with this show, or helping us out, not just me, is DK, one of our writers, also becoming more of a regular on this show. Welcome, DK.
Thank you. It's okay, Ray. I'll help you. Yeah, and don't worry, we won't be talking anything about Tottenham Spurs in this podcast. We'll be talking about the actual big game that happened this weekend, which is the USL Championship match. And as Brad hinted at, yeah, West Coast, best coast, right?
Well, I mean, that's always been the case. The West Coast is the best coast, regardless if there's actual champions or not. One other person helping us out on this episode, we've got that's Mr. Chuck Eldridge. Chuck, welcome on the show.
Thank you very much for having me. I normally am haunting the comment section while you guys do the soccer cast. I was delighted to get the invite to be here.
Yeah, and apparently none of the three of you joined me in a boycott of the USL Championship Final. As all of you know, I was boycotted, especially if you follow me on social media. You knew about this. I know Brad was really excited when he found out I actually, in fact, boycotted this. But so for this next portion of the show, I'm actually going to hand it off to you three because, hey, I boycotted, and I'm sure you all are fine with that.
Yeah, very much fine with it. Wow, first off, before we talk about the game, congratulations to former Orange County players Ronaldo Damas and Duke Lacroix on a well-played game. Damas scored the third of the three Colorado Spring goals. Duke Lacroix made a late first-half substitution for an injured Colorado Springs player. And for a 10 a.m. final for Mountain Time, this stadium was actually fairly packed. And according to, a lot of the people who were there, the Rhode Island fans, anywhere from like 1 to 300 showed up and showed out and were loud. But unfortunately, playing at altitude clearly had an effect on Colorado because they really didn't get too many chances on goal and really couldn't do anything with those chances. DK, take us through this game. What'd you see? What'd you like? What'd you not like in this game?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Brad said Colorado there. He meant Rhode Island. But I just had to call you out for it. Yeah, I mean, I think, to start off, Rhode Island did some really amazing things this season. As much as I was rooting for the Western Conference to take the final, the playoff run that Rhode Island had was fantastic. I mean, they almost pulled the same thing that Phoenix did last season, which was, win the championship every match on the road. They really had just a fantastic playoff run, which was great. Unfortunately for them, Colorado Springs, absolutely, shut them down in this match. one thing that I saw while I was watching the match was just like, it seemed that Colorado Springs kind of knew what to do to Rhode Island, which was just be completely aggressive, which I think everybody thought maybe Louisville would have done to them, but they switched that on their heads. And Colorado Springs, absolutely was pushing forward the entire time, putting pressure on their defense. And because of that, not really letting anything get to their main striker, Dequa, who's always been a USL great talent. But the goals that Colorado Springs had were just phenomenal. Especially that second one. That second one, they left, Koge Vegas just right here. It's fantastic. He didn't do anything, just left him on his heels. And I remember watching that at the pub, and even people who were watching the Tottenham City game were like, "Whoa, that keeper was just completely beat like nothing." So kudos to Colorado Springs for being aggressive and for absolutely blowing out Rhode Island in this championship. They left no questions. They deserved that win.
All right.
I
Chuck.
agree. I think that Colorado Springs was dominant. It was their barn. It was their normal altitude, and they played like champions that day. But the one comment that I want to say is how good the game looked. I'm very appreciative to CBS for showing this USL final. It was an early start time, but they showed it to the nation on the main CBS station all across the land, and they made it look good. The commentary, Mike Watts, Devin Kerr, I believe, were on the mics. And I saw a comment already from the people watching the soccer cast here saying how good that was. And that team we're used to, and we watch the ESPN Plus broadcasts or the local broadcasts on KCAL and others, but to have them on the mics for such a beautifully filmed, multi-camera using national telecast, I thought it was a great selling point for the league, and it made the league look good.
Yeah, I have to echo that. I was about to ask you, Chuck, what your thoughts were about the stream, but you stole the question straight from me. Huge shout out to the league for getting this on national TV, for, Colorado Springs hosting this game with all the good angles, a great crowd who were in attendance and supporting their team. And honestly, if we look back on this past year, as we see Ronaldo Damas just going the distance one-on-one, the league has done pretty much, I think, everything right in trying to get exposure. They had games on different networks that were free to most people, that being Golazo. But not just that, also being on network television, having multiple games on ESPN networks, having multiple games on CBS Sports, and the climax here of the championship on regular CBS is absolutely incredible for the game that this league is really showcasing. And huge shout outs for Rhode Island for even getting to this spot in the first place. They absolutely earned their spot going through some very tough opponents, including Louisville. And we are not going to, hate on that. They are a first-year expansion. And if you remember having our Rhode Island guest on the show earlier this year, he was talking about how Cano Smith, they were just happy that they were on a streak of draws and just getting points. And most of those draws weren't even coming from them giving up the wins as we've been accustomed to. I want to get a couple final thoughts on you guys before we give this back over to Ray so he can end his little boycott of this final. DK?
Yeah. One thing I wanted to point out, especially as we were watching kind of the recap there, is, I think a big reason that Colorado was able to hold their dominant play was Herrera. And, Herrera did great against us as well. I think he kept in like a for sure goal, if I can remember correctly. And he was just fantastic. They had some just really big standouts. Like, although we are all going to be focused on Damas, and Damas got a fantastic third goal that really just put the nail in the coffin. Like, Damas was our MVP of 2021, but Colorado Springs had a really, really strong squad. And I said it when we were going to be facing them in the conference semifinals, that was going to be the hardest match of the playoffs. And look at that. They won the championship. So, kudos to them, and, kudos to Rhode Island. Although I was rooting for the Switchbacks to keep it in the West. I mean, you can't ask for anything more for a first year expansion than getting to the championship of the USL. So really just applaud them, applaud their fans, showing up to that final, showing up to a lot of the away, playoff matches is really great to see, and really great to see for the league. So it's really awesome. And it gives a lot of boost to a few expansion teams that we're going to have this season, to be like, hey, let's put our all into it. And maybe we can do something like Rhode Island, which is only going to grow the league more.
Yeah, for those who know me, I always have I keep an eye on the goaltenders. I have a soft spot for goaltenders. So for this one, I really was watching Colorado Springs goalkeeper Christian Herrera versus a Rhode Island's Koke Vegas. That to me was the thing to watch, and that is just my goalkeeper bias fandom. And watching this game, I really thought that it was a big difference in the goalkeeping. As mentioned before, Koke Vegas was just rooted. His boots were rooted for a couple of the opportunities that I thought were savable. That second goal was a gorgeous offensive effort by Colorado Springs, but I do think that was a savable shot by Vegas, and he didn't try. And that's the moment where I knew his team seemed to be out of it. I thought that Herrera, when he was called, he was fantastic. Though he was not called a lot. But man, he is quite the presence. I mean, he's my size. He's 6'6", I believe, stand there in goal. A lot more athletic than I am. And it was fantastic to see him. But that said, I always will have some Damas love. And I was just delighted to see him play the entire game there and get that goal. And the one good Koke Vegas save was in the final extra minutes against Ronaldo Damas, because he almost potted too. But it was fantastic to see a Colorado Springs team effort from the goalkeeper on out. It wasn't just a Damas-centric team. It was well-balanced. And that's the reason that they were hoisting that very large trophy at the end of the match.
Yeah, I'll give my last closing thought. Big congratulations to Logan, who is now, I think, 3-0 in terms of taunting opposing fans, saying you'll never say that you're champions. I believe he said it against San Antonio. I know he said it against Phoenix, and this year I know he said it against Colorado Springs, and all three of those teams have won. So if you want to win a championship, go taunt Logan Dollar on social media.
But let's just say that would only work if they haven't won a championship in the past, because that's what the taunt is, that you'll never be champions. So you wouldn't be able to taunt Colorado Springs again to say you'll never be champions and they win it, because obviously the taunt wouldn't quite work there. Let me jump on here really quick, right? Because I know, as you guys know, and many of the listeners know, I didn't watch the match because both teams sported Capelli kits, but I'm gonna just jump in with a fun little couple things here. First, y'all are mentioning Ronaldo Damas over and over. You're forgetting to mention he has a title in front of his name. Orange and Black Soccer Cast Hall of Famer Ronaldo Damas, who was a star in this match. Also, if you go back in the history, since 2019, when Orange County has made the playoffs, they have lost to the eventual champions every year they've made the playoffs, unless they won it themselves. So you go back to 2019, that was Real Monarchs. You go back 2021, obviously we won the championship. 2022, I forget.
We did not make the playoffs.
We did not make the playoffs. 2022,
No.
2023. Phoenix
No, we did
wins.
not.
They eliminated us, and then this year Colorado Springs wins. We got eliminated by them. So you can say Orange County, the team that knocked them out, were the champions the year that the playoffs happened. So if you don't face that team, maybe something different happens. So a fun way to look at things when you look at those stats. But again, did not watch it because Capelli was being worn on those kits. Just so you know, Brad.
It's the principle of the whole thing. It's principalities in this.
All right, let's move on and let's talk about Orange County Soccer Club and their 2024 season. We've talked about in the past, at least you could quote me on this, right? I think I mentioned it's a tale of three different, completely different seasons. You have the season under Coach Morten Carlson, you have the season against under Coach Paul Hardiman, and then you have the season under Coach Danny Stone. So it's going to be really difficult. We're going to condense this. We don't have, but a half hour really to discuss this as much as we want to. But let's just do a quick little recap, and we're going to break it down to those three seasons. Then we'll answer some other questions on this. If I can recall, there was a lot of hope going into the season, right? I believe each and every one of us, I know our show, we were really excited coming to this season, expecting this team to be competing for a top 1 or 2 seed in the West all season long. This is early on in the season. We believe, if I can recall correctly, I don't have the schedule in front of me, but I believe we got off to a decently good start early on in the season, the first, 5, 6, 7 matches. Then we sort of hit a little bit of stumbling block with some injuries, some players not performing well. And then we eventually lose Coach Morten Carlson to Europe. What are your all your thoughts? Let's just talk about that first part of the season under Coach Morten Carlson. I'll go to you first, DK, because I really want to hear what you have to say or your thoughts on this. Orange County under Coach Morten Carlson, how do you think we fared at that time of the season?
I mean, I think we were average. I don't think we were anything super impressive, which, kind of contradicts to what everybody expected under Morten Carlson again, because we had such a fantastic, 2023 season with him. And he is a good coach, and that is, apparent with his move to, a larger club, which is fantastic. And I think we were all really happy for him. There's, excuses that you can make that there were a lot of injuries. But even in those, I think 5 or 6 games when we were undefeated, I think a lot of us were talking about how, sure, we were undefeated, but we weren't looking as good as we thought we should based off of how many players returned, based off of the performance of the season prior. And so it was really one of those, elements that I'm not going to say I was disappointed by Carlson era of this season, but it was not what I expected as far as performance. And I wanted a little bit more, and whether that's on Carlson or whether that's out of the squad, that's a debate you can make. But I just didn't see much. I saw a lot of kind of strategy of long ball plays that I've been on the show talking about how I didn't like with this squad and how they were just hoofing it up and hoping that Zubac and Among were going to net it, but they weren't early in the season. So it was tough. Our offense all season was a little bit weak. Even, in our peak under Danny Stone, it still wasn't the best. So you can blame that where you want to blame that. But long story short, I expected a little bit more out of the Carlson era, and I was really happy that he moved on, but I wanted more.
Yeah, and just to sort of paint the picture so we can all remember sort of how this worked, right? He was there from the beginning of the season. Final match with Orange County was on June 22nd against Indy 11. It was a victory, a 1-0 victory on the road, which I think at that point was a pretty big victory for Orange County with the way things had going. I believe prior to that, they had lost 5 out of the previous 6 matches, and even 6 out of the previous 7 matches, actually, when you look at it after that good unbeaten start to the season. I believe the record at that point was 6 wins, 6 losses, 3 draws. Brad, your thoughts on the Morten Carlson era of the season for Orange County?
Yeah, I mean, I'm echoing what DK said. To start off the season, we had a game where we got lucky to get a point out of Sacramento with an amazing Colin Shetler goal. Always nice to see a GK with a +1 on it. However, we had some games where we looked absolutely awful and our streak should have ended. I'm recalling the Miami game. Miami was the worst team in the league, probably worst team since the Barracuda days back in the day. And I think they only won 3 games all year and drew only a handful of games as well. And we were one of those games where Miami looked the better team for most of the game. Tulsa, outshot us handedly. And if you remember early on in the season when we had the Tulsa guys on, they were talking about how this team was having internal struggles where players were dropping. Charlie Adams came here to Vegas after starting the preseason with Tulsa because of internal trauma that's going on in that team, and they outshoot us well out-handedly. So we were winning, but it wasn't like a confident win. The Memphis game was a big game for us where we traveled to Memphis and we won early in the season. And then we drew San Antonio on the road before losing to Sacramento. And it really looked tough. And at that point, that's when the losing started coming in droves. Loudoun in the Open Cup, Louisville on the road, Oakland and then Loudoun again at home. At that point, we were really questioning what's going on with the season. And then once when Carlson went to Lyngby, and we had the Paul Hardyman era, which I won't get into right now, it was kind of really mixed bags. Good results, not necessarily best play. And we knew this team could have done better at that point in the year.
Chuck, let me ask you this. We've talked about that era. Let me get your idea. Was there any positives out of that Morton Carlson part of the season that you saw? And maybe, is there anything that maybe concerns you if we would have kept Morton Carlson throughout the season, that maybe things don't turn around? And if you don't have an answer to that, by all means, just say, I don't know.
I do. I would say that the high point of the Morton Carlson era is that he counts as a European transfer for us. It's a little bit of another feather in the cap for Peter Nugent, our ownership, everybody in that front office, because yes, in the moment for our team here in Orange County, the team was not doing so hot, but there's good to the coach. We saw it last season. He's got skills, he's got talent, and another team wanted that and purchased him off of our team. And that is another feather in the cap for Orange County's pipeline to Europe that is setting the standard for North American soccer. I think that, yes, there was a losing streak in that mix, but that point cannot be thrown underneath the couch here. You gotta let that one shine a little bit. But as DK said, the long ball tactic was not working with the personnel he had on the pitch. Zubak did not hit his stride till back half of the season. Thomas Among was mostly coming in off the bench, and it just wasn't hitting. This wasn't 2021 with Ronaldo Damas that can speed past everybody and get that long ball. I mean, you saw it you didn't see it. You had your sartorial standoff. But if those who watched the USL Final saw Ronaldo Damas outrun people for about 80 yards down that pitch to score his goal. And we don't have Ronaldo Damas on our team. And I think that Morton's tactics were not working with the personnel that he had. And we'll talk a bit more injuries in the next segment about that season. That also played a factor about the personnel. So I think that Morton's tactics weren't working with who we had healthy on the field. But I am very proud that he was a part of this club for a year and a half, and that he is another feather in our transfer cap that we have setting that standard.
No, that's a good way to look at some of that stuff. And yes, difficult part. And I'm going to say this, Chuck, you're going to have people going and pausing our episodes and trying to, look up certain words you're using sometimes. Cause there's a word or two. I'm like, and when you're talking about my standoff, what did you call it?
Standoff. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So go look that up, people, because I have no idea what Chuck's talking about. I'm sure DK knows because he's a smart person. Brad probably knows as well. I'm not that smart. So that was the Morton Carlson era. Carlson gets that transfer. So we get that, we get to say we transferred a coach. We don't just transfer players to Europe. We also transfer great coaches to good leagues, great leagues in Europe. So Paul Hardyman comes in. I think a lot of the fans were excited to see Hardyman as an option on there. I know on the podcast, we loved Paul Hardyman for his honesty with us and willingness to talk with us when he was on our show. Didn't quite go as probably many people had hoped with Paul Hardyman. Had some highs, had some lows, but in the end, not the most amazing portion, especially when you get to the end part of his time with Orange County. I believe His last match was the horrendous 6-0 loss on the road in Charleston. Or no, maybe not. Right? No, there was a few more matches maybe after that. I'm wrong.
You were right.
Well, I was right. I'm smart. I am smart sometimes. Thank you, Brad, for correcting me on there and not making me second guess myself. Hardiman, Chuck sort of brought up a little preview of this. Hardiman had to deal with a lot of injuries during his time there. And I think just it's tough, right? Obviously, it's not easy to come in mid-season, even if you've been part of the team and part of the training all season. It's hard to come in and now sort of take control, try and put your touch on a game. Great guy, Paul Hardiman, but he struggled for the results for Orange County. I'm going to go to you first, Chuck, on this. Paul Hardiman, your thoughts?
Paul
on that
Hardiman,
part of the
I
season.
think the thing that none of us will ever truly know is who did he vex that just gathered all the voodoo dolls of our lineup and just pinpricked them with injuries for week after week after week after week. I could be wrong. It could be at the tail end of Morton, but I feel that Paul even had a game where we had 11 people on the list of people who could not play from the roster. That's a full team out there. That is just something very hard to overcome. When that hit in the middle of the season where you have key players and then the reserves that were unavailable for weeks at a time, it just wasn't in the cards for Paul Hardiman. And I know that a lot of us that have met him, have seen what he has done and the effect he has had with the academy players, the younger people, the next wave, and that pipeline coming up to the team and onward to Europe is wonderful and it should be lauded. However, I think that he just was in a situation that I'm not sure anyone could have pulled themselves out of the gutter from. Just all the injuries, and then you get that 6-0 loss, and something needs to change. And the old adage, it's always cheaper to change the coach than a whole lineup. And I think that was that.
That is true. And if I recall, and I don't have the list of the 11 players that were hurt that one match, but I believe if we were able to figure out or find out that list, it probably is a quality USL Championship lineup that you could probably say would beat a team like a Miami or El Paso during the season. It's not like it was 2 or 3 key players and then a bunch of reserves that you don't really see anyways on the pitch. It was legit players. And I know some of it was international play. I believe Duran Furry was one of those that was out because he was on international duty. But still, it was a legit list of names that could compete against teams in this league. And that, so I'm going to go to you, Brad, then on this. Did Paul Hardiman not have a fair shot with this team? He got released before they got healthy again. And we saw the run that happened, and we'll talk about the run under Coach Danny Stone. Do you feel sorry or feel sad for Paul Hardiman that he was released at the time he was released, or did it make sense to you? And you don't have any issues with it?
Yes and yes. I think Paul Hardiman, I was one of the biggest advocates for Hardiman ball because it did away with lopping the ball over the top and really focused on playing through the midfield. Unfortunately, he didn't have players like Kevin Partita and for a certain small amount of time, Kyle Scott during that time. And really 100%, was let down by the injuries. However, it's expected that he should have won some of the games that were on the schedule. He had 2 fantastic games. I remember having him after the 4th of July weekend, Orange County versus Memphis game, where he came on and he was talking about, the struggles that we've had and just how good that game was for the team. I believe it was after the Tampa Bay game. We had him on, actually, which was the weekend after. But kind of contrasting, players such as Ben Norris coming on, having the game, finicking with subs such as Ashton Miles, who played a half and was subbed for Dylan Powers because both of them were really, hard for minutes during that time of the year. I would have liked to see the team make a loan signing during that time that wasn't just, a nobody. I believe we brought in a 22-day contract for Mr. Oh God, what's the name off the top of my head? Sergio Chavez, who was playing in USL League One earlier during that time. But some of those games were real stinkers, and there's no arguing against it. That North Carolina game in early August where we couldn't even register a shot on goal, I think performances like that, obviously the pre-alluded to 6-0 where we were down a man the whole game, and then Birmingham game where we just couldn't find the net either. Those spelled the end of a really unfortunate time for Paul Hardiman. I really hope to see him find another space on the team, and it was really nice seeing the team promoting kind of the guy within the organization instead of immediately going out. Unfortunately for Hardiman, it just didn't work out, and I really feel bad about it because I do love him as a coach.
I'm going to go to you next, DK, and I'm going to probably make it a little bit difficult for you, and feel free to decline to answer this portion and then give your overall thoughts on it. Obviously, when Morten Carlson left, Hardiman was given the position. We brought in Danny Stone, I believe, shortly thereafter as the assistant. Was the writing on the wall with if Paul Hardiman does not get wins and draws and no losses, pretty much was he already looking over his shoulder at Danny Stone as like, if I struggle, this is already not happening? And is that difficult for a coach in that situation?
Yeah, no, I mean, you touched on something I was already going to bring up. So, yeah, I think when they hired Danny Stone as the assistant coach, I think everybody looked at that as, oh, he will be the head coach one day. And I'm sure if fans are thinking that Paul Hardiman is also thinking that. So it just kind of plays in more to, he was dealt a shit hand. Sorry that I cursed. But he was, it was a rough time for Hardiman with all the injuries, as we've already commented on, with Danny Stone coming in as the assistant coach as a preparation for like, hey, let's make sure that we have somebody available in case this goes sour. I think that's really tough on somebody like Hardiman, especially with how much he impacted the Orange County culture through his tenure of being with us. He was the assistant coach in 2021 when we won the season. He is probably one of the biggest, contributors to how our academy project has done, has blossomed, I guess I should say. So he will always be an Orange County Soccer Club legend. And it was unfortunate his tenure not his tenure, but it was unfortunate the stint that he had as head coach.
It was a tough. It was
a
tough time, to be coach with all the injuries, with a transition and all that. I agree with you on that, DK.
Yeah, 100%. What I will say, and what I truly do believe, kind of going off of what Brad was saying about Hardy Ball, right? And that we did love to see a change in tactics. And we saw it against, the Detroit game where we won, I think, like 3-2, especially. And that was a big win for us. Is that I don't think you get the success of Danny Stone without the Hardiman change. I think he did come in. I think he implemented things to this squad that were important to the progress of the squad that Danny Stone ended up taking to success. So as much as you can say his stint wasn't great and that he was, dealt a lot of really bad cards, I think the changes that he made were important, not just for the club, but for the squad and their mentality and their play on the field.
And before we move on, I do want to let people know, if you're listening to this, that means you're listening to us. You know who we are. Make sure you subscribe to our podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts, whether it's on iTunes, Spotify, or any other podcast provider. Also follow us on social media. Listen to what we have to say there. And a great thing about that is if you follow us and do that, you can communicate with us on social media, and you can agree or disagree with us and let us know what the thoughts are. And even if you don't know DK's Twitter handle, you can go on to our podcast Twitter handle, tag us and say, hey, I absolutely agree with what DK had to say there. And then as always, give us likes, thumbs up, hearts, whatever it is on whatever platform. That definitely helps us with all the fancy algorithm stuff that these platforms like to see. Transitioning to probably, I would assume all of you all are going to agree, the most successful portion of the season, the final portion under Coach Danny Stone. I believe, if I'm correct here, one loss, and that was his first match at the helm of Orange County after like 2 days as the official coach to train the team. From there on, did not lose again until that final match. So I guess 2 losses, the final match in the playoffs against Colorado Springs. Brad, you get first shot here at Danny Stone. Your thoughts of the Danny Stone era, and why was that the best era or best portion of the season for Orange County?
Yeah, I mean, moving on from Hardyman was probably a tough decision emotionally for the team. However, for the locker room, it clearly looked like under Danny Stone, the players were more confident. More importantly, though, it looked like the ball was finding the back of the net and the defense was playing stouter during that time. Because with Hardyman, the biggest complaint we had was we would collapse early in these games, against Charleston, the 6-0. We wouldn't get into the game early, and we would not get into the game until late, and the game's already out of hand. With Danny Stone, however, we had a lot more early goals, a lot more competitive in games, playing still tough opponents, and more importantly, the ball was finding the back of the net, and it wasn't for the opposing team. I think the stat I said was after Danny Stone took over, we had like 5 goals allowed in the regular season. It was 2 against Colorado, or no, sorry, it was 2 against Hartford. It was 1 against Las Vegas, and then 3 against Las Vegas. So 6 goals in, what was that, 11 games, 10 games for Danny Stone in charge. So the defense stepped up under Danny Stone. Offensively, I don't think we were as dominant as the scoreline suggested. We were often winning these games 1-0, 2-0. A couple of own goals helped us out in those games. But it doesn't matter. You can't complain when you're winning. The team has such confidence, especially in the back. Shetler was making some amazing saves. The back 4 was healthy. So I hope to see Danny Stone get offered the job during this offseason. I think that's probably top on our Black Friday shopping wish list, would be to see the team splurge on Danny Stone and then hopefully make some sales. But can't complain with the final results, and some injuries late down the stretch, not having a healthy midfield against Colorado Springs Switchbacks definitely hurt in the playoffs. And if we had, a healthy Kyle Scott and a healthy Partita during that game, who knows? Maybe we're in the championship game, or maybe we're visiting Vegas.
Yeah, things could have been a lot different with a healthy midfield for Coach Danny Stone. I think we mentioned it multiple times on this show with Coach Stone was he was playing playoff soccer from the get-go, and not just the style, but literally the team was fighting for their position in the playoffs. When he took over, this team was dead and out of the water. I think we all were in the mindset of, oh yeah, this season is pretty much done. Now we got to start looking what's going to happen for next season. All of a sudden, Coach Stone brings in the playoff style soccer tactically. We start getting the results, and then we started slowly getting excited that, hey, this team actually has a chance to get into the playoffs. And we all knew with this roster, again, this is going back to the beginning of the season, we were all excited for this roster, knowing that if this team plays to what we think they can do, they can beat anyone in this league. And they showed that against Memphis. They almost showed it against Colorado Springs, if not for just the difficulty of playing at the altitude and in the cold weather, and with some key players missing from a match. So I think Coach Danny Stone was just like a breath of fresh air for the team, for the fans, tactically. I think anyone can agree with us on this. I think I'm not going to say 100% because maybe, who knows, but 99.9% of Orange County fans want him back next season to see what he can do with a full preseason training, setting up the full tactics and stuff like that. DK, thoughts on the Danny Stone era for Orange County? Ooh, pull the Brad.
Yep.
I pull the Brad. Just to comment on exactly what you just said, I think everybody wants Danny Stone back. I think it would be foolish for the club not to do everything they can to bring him back. Because, Danny Stone really unlocked this squad. I think one of the, focuses that he did was, and our strength was using, players like Dunbar and Jameson and Dogman and Lamb to really push to the outside, to stretch the opposition out, and then quickly turn it back into the center to get goals from Zubac. That's what Zubac is for. He's tall, he's good at poaching, and getting those goals. And I think that was something that was missing from the, first 3 quarters of our season, really, was really kind of utilizing him and the squad to their strengths. And I think it was reminiscent of last season under Carlson too. I mean, I think we always have looked at our wings and our wing backs as being our biggest strength. And Danny Stone unlocked that. What he did really well was also, push Kasipli and, Powers and Partita and Scott to also perform really well. And unfortunately, we were missing a couple of those for Colorado Springs, but I loved what Danny Stone was able to unlock out of the squad. And I think anybody that watched how Orange County was playing, whether it was, a defensive game or not, and that's kind of, what we've always been about for the past 5 years has been a defensive game, which maybe people don't get super excited about, but it wins matches. I think you look at those tactics and you can't help but say that it was fantastic. So I would love to see that. I would love to see him build on that, especially because I worry that we're not going to get as many, quote unquote starters that we did for this season, next season. But also I don't know anything, so I'm not trying to spoil anything. I don't know what signings are going to happen or not, but hopefully Danny Stone can look at his tactics and his strengths as a coach and build upon that for the roster. And hopefully we see it do better than the beginning of the season was.
And we'll get into roster and maybe our wish list for returning players in just a moment. But by the way, we'll have to talk to DK offline because apparently Dylan thinks you could read a phone book well. Maybe we'll have to do an off-season 4-series episode podcast of you just reading the phone book. Chuck, your thoughts on Orange County with Danny Stone at the helm for the final part of the season, and again, why do they have to pull everything they can to try and bring him back?
To use a phrase that my father liked to say, you could see during the Danny Stone segment of the season that there was a hitch in the giddy-up of the team. They were running faster. They were running as a team. There was a reinvigoration. We fans like myself, the podcasting team, you guys, will never be in that locker room pregame, postgame practice, hearing what the motivational speeches might be, but we could see the effect. We saw the post-win photos of the team just full of life, and that is going to give credit to the new guy at the helm. And I think that he was able to use strategic substitutions very well. I thought that he would put in the right people at the right time, and we would get a lot of payoffs, or they would just wear down the opponents, whatever might be needed. And that was something that we got to see in game. That was different than previous managerial options had utilized the team. And he had a healthy team. Whoever had those voodoo doll pins for our previous 2 managers had lightened up a little bit, and all of a sudden the injury list was 2 or 3 guys instead of a full team of 11. So I think there's a lot of excitement. I had the pleasure of talking to Coach Stone a little bit right before playoffs, and he just felt full of life and just had a love for this team and what the team could do. And I believed him. And I think that the effect you saw on the pitch for those final run of games to secure playoffs, and in the playoffs, the team believes him too. And that right there is worth something. And I hope that our front office feels the same and saw the same results we did as fans and makes it happen for next year.
Yeah, and I can even just, piggyback off of what Chuck said. When you look at the interviews that the club put out with Danny Stone, and I also had a couple conversations with him myself, is Danny Stone was very much about the team culture. When players got player of the month or team of the week, or he got coach of the month, it was so much about how the team elevated him or the players to that position. So, although he loved to celebrate, individual progress, what I really appreciated from him as a coach was how he thought the team as a whole pushed the individual progress. And that's something I would love to see in, future seasons, whether it's next season or a couple seasons from now. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of piggyback off that.
Nope, perfectly makes sense. Yeah, I'm going to piggyback off of all of that as well, and basically say in my interactions talking with Coach Stone after matches, when I would ask him about individual performances from players, he would praise it, and then he would jump into the team aspect of how it supported that player to be successful. And it wasn't just that player, it was the team. And I know, Brad, I'm sorry, I'm going to bring up my kids' team, but when I coach my kids' team, I focus on the team tactics. I'm not big on superstars or star players. Even if I know I have players that are amazing and they can get the job done, I try and make it about the team and find a way to have them help support the team. And for me, if a player can help other players be more successful, that's even better than them being able to be successful on their own. And that's what I like to see out of players. And I feel like that's what you saw with Coach Danny Stone at the helm. My only regret is that we didn't get to see a Brian Olowski with Coach Stone at the helm, because I feel like he would have probably opened up Brian Olowski to a whole nother level. And nothing against Chris Hagart. Brian Olowski is the man in that sort of role for Orange County. Chris did a good job with the team and filling in. But we sort of missed that. And we talked about in the playoffs, missing a Kevin Partita and a Kyle Scott. We tend to forget Brian Olowski was part of this team. And if he would have been in there as well in the playoffs, it's a whole nother picture that we're seeing. And I think Coach Danny Stone could have found a way to integrate him and made him successful out there as well. So there we have it. A quick, 30-minute rundown of the season. I know it's difficult. We probably could have talked about this for 2 whole episodes if we really wanted to, but I don't want to take too much time away from what we have coming up in the next few weeks. Before we move on this show, I just want to give everyone a sort of preview of what to expect over the next few weeks before we go on our little hiatus for the off season. We will initiate, or we'll start our player grades next episode, more than likely the next week, unless my co-hosts are unavailable. For those unfamiliar with that, we like to go down the whole roster of everyone that played for the team in 2024. And each of us will give their player grades and give a very brief justification for those grades. And we grade everyone that played even a second on the pitch for Orange County. So you will get to hear our thoughts on that. And we'd love to have you all on our live stream. So if you do not know, if you listen to us in podcast form, we stream live every Monday at 8 p.m. Pacific time. For the player grade episodes, it's awesome to have you all on there, because we like to see what your thoughts are on the grades, to see if we're in agreement, or if you totally disagree with what Brad has to say, because he's giving someone like a Thomas Among an F, or DK giving someone like an Ethan Zubak an incomplete. We like to see what your thoughts are with our grades and what you would give these player grades. So make sure you check out, and this is why you should follow us, because then you'll know when our live shows are. After that, once we go through player grades, typically it takes 2 episodes to go through it, because it's a lot of players to talk about. We do our final show of the season. That's going to be our award show. We're going to send the ballots out shortly here, probably within the next 3 to 4 days, you should receive a ballot. You'll get to pick your choices for everything, including goal of the year, celebration of the year, player of the year, win of the year, a bunch of other stuff we will have on there for you to pick from. So please be on the lookout for that as well. Whew. I was talking. I got to catch my breath. Let's do this. Before we move on to some non-Orange County stuff to talk about, I want to ask y'all, with the holiday seasons coming up, I want to get your wish list for gifts. 3 gifts you want. And when I say gifts, returning players, coaches, front office staff, we're just going to go with the assumption that no one's returning for sure. What are the 3 people that you want to see back with Orange County next season? I'm going to go to you first, Chuck. And to make this more difficult, you can't pick something that anyone else picked. So if Chuck picks the 3 that you wanted, you have to think of 3 more and give a quick justification. Just don't take too long on it. Chuck, go for it.
Gotcha. Well, I've got to go Coach Stone. I think that is going to be integral for the next season because he lit a fire underneath that team and we all saw it. And I want to see that just turn into a wildfire and just, burn through the whole USL Championship. Number 2, I'm going with the goalie. I don't think that there will be anyone of a higher caliber than the way Colin Shuttler has played this season out there on the open market. And I would love to see him extend all his team records that he has with us for another year and become a legend. And you know what? I love me some Seth Kasipli. I sure hope that he's got a little bit more energy in those legs and just control of that ox cord in the locker room so much that they're like, let's give that guy another year and have him rock out for us. That would be my 3 wish lists for you.
What about for you, Brad?
Yeah, I'm going to go. My first top of the line wish list is it's not much of a stay. I'd like to see Bryce Jamison get sold this year. I think he's an outstanding player who needs to go. And, while we still have him under contract. And with that, my wish list is to bring up Ben Barjolo. We've heard so much from all the players in the academy who we've had on the show, just singing his praises. And he needs his shot now. He's been with the academy team for about 1.5 years. Beyond that, I'd love to see Ethan Zubak, who figured out and was healthy at the end of the year, figure out how to get the ball in the back of the net. I'd like to see him come back as a mentor and really, hopefully, continue with his career with us. And then finally, I'm not going to take the obvious one from DK. I know who he wants to say. I'd like to see Mr. Dylan Powers come back for the same reason that Chuck said Seth Kasipli. I think Dylan Powers still has it in his legs. He is a monster on the field, and I'd love to have him back. And I know I didn't take your guy, DK.
Go for it, DK. What do you got?
Yeah, I would say, Ray, you actually made my life super easy by saying I can't pick any of the ones that they chose because there's a lot of players on this squad that I would love to see return. So the fact that some of them have been eliminated from my wish list is great and makes my life easier. Kyle Scott, obviously I think he is one of the most crucial players that we have on the pitch this year and last year. So of course I would love to see him back for 2025. And I think is no surprise to anybody that's listened to me on the podcast before, but our captain, Marcus Knockham, as well, I think would be phenomenal to see back. I think the culture that he gives to the squad as the captain and the leader, I think is amazing. And not just to the squad, but to the fans. He's always somebody that's, who's proponent for engagement and on all sides of the pitch. Which I think is amazing. And then I think the last person that I would choose is a little bit tough, but I'm going to say Ryan Dogman.
I thought this was easy.
There's a lot of players that I would like to see back. So, but Ryan Dogman, I think when he was healthy this season and last season, obviously, when he was healthy, he was phenomenal. And not just does really great for us on defense, but does a lot for us on offense and crossing. So, yeah, Scott, Knockham, and Dogman.
Chuck, remind me, who were your 3? Because I don't want to steal your 3.
Coach Stone, Colin Shuttler, Seth Kasipli.
Man, y'all are I should have gone first, so I made it a lot easier for me. But here's I think I got these all right. My first that I'm gonna say is I actually want to see Cameron Dunbar back. I thought he started finding his role with his team towards the end of the season, found the back of the net, was the assist man on the Dylan Powers header in Memphis, which was an amazing assist. I think just he needed that time to sort of find his role on this team. So I definitely would love to see him back. Another name to throw onto this list, and this is going to be because my son loves him. I want to see Thomas Among back on this roster. I want to see what he can do for this team. And lastly, because we're so good at developing youth, and he showed some good signs this season, Pedro Guimaraes, however you say that last name, and I know they listen. His family listens and likes to chuckle whenever we try to pronounce his last name. But Pedro showed some really great stuff this season. He showed there was a few games where he looked like a 16-year-old playing with men, but for the most part, 90% of the time, he looked like a man playing with men back there, even though he's only 16. And hey, he represents right now Aliso Viejo, which is my hometown. So got to throw in a little bonus for that. All right, really quick. I know we're running out of time here, but I want to ask you all if there's any concern, and this is non-OC related, then we can ask you if there's any last things you want to talk about OC. USL League One, USL Championship have both announced teams that are no longer going to be part of it, whether it's the league, the mutual agreement to no longer be part of league. I think it was Colorado Hailstorm, Central Valley Fuego, no longer in League One. And I believe almost immediately after Orange County eliminates Memphis says, hey, we're done. We're out of this. Is there any thoughts of concern that we have teams that maybe you're hoping they do good? Because, I mean, Memphis is not really competing against much other than NBA in that market. Is there any concern? And I'm going to go to you first, Brad, because you know what it's like to have your home team sort of quit on the game. Is there any concerns on your end from those announcements this year? Even though we know Dallas is coming into the league, and I believe Santa Barbara is now coming to the championship because of some of these announcements. Any concerns though?
So, from my understanding, with what I've heard interiorly, that's not even a word, from the inside of the Memphis organization is it's stadium related completely for them, that they wanted to stay. The city wanted them to stay. The fans wanted them to stay. But, politics within the city and those who have money and have other sports teams in that city that I will not call out, kind of really forced their hand in not allowing them to build a stadium of their own. And the USL Championship has been strict on that recently. You need your own stadium to play or have your own tenant rights in your stadium like Orange County does. And they don't have that. So they transferred their USL Championship spot to Santa Barbara, who I believe will start in 2026. My big concern is USL League One. After the shenanigans, and I'm not even going to go into detail about it, it looks horrible for the league. If I'm an investor, I want to be in the USL Championship. I want nothing to do with USL League One. And that's because, Vegas, new owner, made it to the quarterfinals or semifinals. New team entirely, Rhode Island, made it to the playoffs, went on a win streak. There is no better selling point for the league than that kind of exposure.
Chuck, your thoughts on the teams that announced they're leaving? Any concerns from you on your end, or do you see this as just regular business in second tier, third tier U.S. soccer?
Well, I'm going to echo a lot of what Brad said in the fact that I think that it shows the necessity to have some control / be the primary tenant / own a soccer specific stadium. You said some nice things from the inside, the Memphis 901 thing, but they're in a AAA baseball stadium, which they're going to go head to head against all summer long. And it's a Cardinals team too, which has a big following. So it's a saturated, not just market, but a saturated building where they are always the second fiddle. And as we fought here in Orange County, we didn't want to be second fiddle, third fiddle in our own building. So I think that any team that is entering the league needs to have a plan for control of a soccer-specific stadium. Now, for League One, I don't know all the details of what the Central Valley Fuegos leaving aspect was. I've heard some rumors about the Northern Colorado hailstorm. For League One to thrive, I feel like it's going to need to break into regional areas. That would be my, armchair analysis. Is League One to live has to shorten the national distance. It can't be a national league until like you get to the finals itself. It really needs to have that shorter distance for teams to travel. Antelope Valley here in California probably was super excited that Santa Barbara was going to be their closest little road trip, and now that's gone. And so I can't even fathom where Antelope Valley's new League One team is going to have to travel for their closest game now that Central Valley Fuego's gone. So control of your own soccer-specific stadium, or at least primary resident in whatever stadium you have, I think is key for the championship. And breaking down to regional areas for League One is probably the key for that to be viable in the future. That's my thoughts.
Yeah, it's scary when you have the instability, because I mean, we know Memphis, but there's rumors of some other teams that you hear, in the rumorscapes of teams that may no longer want to be part of the championship, which is scary. I'm going to throw a second little twist to this question for you, and then we can sort of wrap things up here. DK, being that Orange County does not own their stadium, I know they have a long-term agreement, but obviously, if anyone knows, contracts can be broken, things can change, who knows, right? Does this type of stuff put any worry on you, knowing that Orange County is always, they're doing better, but they still struggle to get butts in the seats at the stadium. They're fighting against Angels, Ducks, Beaches, Disneyland, King, LA. We're not even talking about the LA market teams that fans can go to and the two other MLS teams. When you see this type of instability and, again, potential for other teams we haven't heard official announcers for yet, is there anything that scares you about that as an Orange County fan?
Personally, and not to say that I know anything about the city politics by any means, because I don't. I'm not afraid of the standing of, personally, Orange County Soccer Club. I think we'll be around for a while, as long as the league is still around. My biggest worry is, when we see teams folding, is the league itself. If the league goes, then maybe we go, which is unfortunate. Maybe we look for elsewhere, but that would be my biggest kind of worry right now, is just focusing on the league. And as far as the current conversation goes, obviously, with Memphis leaving and a soccer specific stadium kind of being necessary, I think there's really, and this isn't new, this is a conversation that people have had on the internet for the past few years, but is, pro rel as a possibility. And I think pro rel is only a possibility if you get soccer specific stadiums. If you have teams that have a stadium that they are for sure going to be able to play at and have, not full control over necessarily, because that's on city stuff, but, priority, I guess, is the main issue. And that's kind of where you see with Memphis. So I think it's good that we're being stricter on, or not we, but the league is being stricter on stadium kind of, qualifications. However, it makes you worry when clubs can't reach that, and whether we'd be able to have enough clubs within the league to be able to have something like pro rel. And I think when you comment on Brad's, idea of the issue really lying with League One, I think pro rel doesn't exist without League One, obviously. So if they can't support League One and allowing those clubs to succeed, then there's not going to be that avenue of pro rel for championship to succeed as well. You need both leagues to be fully supported. And that's something that, USL overall needs to kind of focus on.
Not trying to say, be scared that USL is, in trouble, or that Orange County's in trouble. I don't think that's the case at this point. Just, throw some fear in the mind when you have some teams that potentially you consider successful, or teams that at least are showing some success. And this is where you look at with Orange County, just the more fan engagement, the more fan support, growing the fan base and all that is going to be helpful. Orange County at least is in a sort of nice area where they've done a really good job of marketing, not just to local fans, but even European fans with the ownership opportunities for people in the UK, the ownership process in the US, and even just with their battle for the stadium in Irvine, I think put a lot of media focus on them from people not just in the area but from around the league, because they see Orange County as a team. Let's not forget, Orange County is like one of the originals of this league. They were the first like West Coast entity. If you go back to the old days, I think it was the LA Blues days, they were the one team on the West Coast. Everyone else was East Coast and Caribbean that Orange County was having to play against. So Orange, as much as people think the league hates Orange County, I don't know anything, but Orange County is still a big part of the history of this league. And for something like that, when you have a team that's a historic team in the league, that's a team that you definitely want to see succeeding. So local fans and just fans across second tier soccer need to make sure to be supportive. All right. Last thing I want to open up to. Any other thoughts before we wrap things up for this episode? I know we went a little long, but it was good conversation. So hopefully producer Andy doesn't slap my hand for this, but any last thoughts before we wrap things up?
I'll go with that. I think that there were some really great strides that our team here in Orange County made, getting our team on the air and getting the local broadcasts of KCAL, of I think it's FanDuel is the name of it now, the former Bally's, former Fox Sports, whoever has the sponsorship rights. I think that effort should be applauded for whatever team in the front office was spearheading that. And I think that is going to grow the team, because as producer Andy often says, if we can go to a local restaurant or bar and say, hey, put on KCAL, that's a lot easier than, hey, do you have an ESPN Plus subscription or Golazo? Like having all those options locally is going to be a big boon, I feel, for this team going forward. I'm grateful for it.
Definitely. Brad, DK, anything you want to throw in before we wrap things up?
No, I got nothing further to add.
Just something quick to add is, as far as Orange County goes, I like this season that they were interested more in engaging fans for events that, they wanted to do before games, away parties, or watch parties, whatever that might mean. However, I just hope that they've learned from this season, especially, and start to plan things a little bit more in advance to hopefully get more engagement. I think they built a good foundation for things like that. And I think that as a fan, I'm excited to see what the club and front office can do more.
So I'll throw this out there, and I saw a comment on here about this from USL Insight. Yes, I want to see the channels, like the organizations. I want to see more help. If you all watch NBA, a game could be on ESPN, but they're telling you what's on the rest of the week. It could be on TNT. It could be on NBA TV. It could be elsewhere. They're telling you where you can watch things elsewhere throughout the week. I'd love to see more of that from, say, if a match is on ESPN Plus or ESPN or CBS. Hey, mention all this stuff. I know they do a little bit of it, but really do a stronger job of advertising the league. I know it's sort of the league does all the stuff and they're just having these partners, but still I'd like to see a lot more push on a broader sense from everyone on that. Cause I'm sure obviously ESPN doesn't want to push people to CBS and CBS doesn't want to push people to whatnot. And also I want to see more support from podcasters, from other entities, other teams, right? I know our producer Andy has done a great job of trying to reach out to other entities, other podcasters, other media. And we're a show that likes to combine with each other and likes to contribute with each other and likes to do things. I want to see that more. I know there's been times where we struggle to get experts from other teams on the show. And there's times we try and pull things off. I mean, again, I'm going back to earlier in the season where we had someone from Pittsburgh that was at a high school hockey match at midnight in Pittsburgh, taking time to talk to us. That's things I'd love to see from the other podcasts and the other people like us from other teams doing, and not having to reach out to these, journalists that this is their full-time job and they're willing to take time to speak to us because it works in their schedule. I'd love to be able to speak to other podcasters because that's how we can help everyone be successful. With that said, hey, we got to wrap things up. This has been a long show. So really quick, what did you learn in this episode, Brad?
I learned that I got put on the spot for this first. I learned that the top priority for Chuck is to keep Mr. Stone on the team, and I think that that's the unanimous easiest decision the team can make this offseason.
DK, what'd you learn? And I learned that DK is going to pull a double Brad on this episode. Chuck, what did you learn this episode?
Double Brad. You go, Chuck.
I learned that you all are gracious hosts. Thank you very much for letting me step in and join you all for an evening. It felt great to get a little bit more voice than just how fast I could type on the comments on the YouTube channel. So thank you all for hosting me.
All right, now DK, now that your mic's not muted, what did you learn this episode?
I learned that there's going to be only one time that I'm this excited to agree with Ray that the Tottenham Spurs won a game, when it means that Man City lost.
Hey, it was a beauty. It was a beauty.
The only time I'll ever agree with you on that.
It was beautiful. With that said, I want to thank everyone that listened live, contributed in the chats. Thank you for doing so. We love when that happens. Also, I want to thank our special guest host, Chuck, for joining us. Also, my other regular co-host. I enjoy talking to you as well, Brad, DK. Producer Andy, as always, for all the hard work behind the scenes. I appreciate that as well. Again, make sure you please like, share, subscribe, wherever that is, whether it's on podcast, social media, whatever. Go check out our website, OCSC Podcast as well. OCSCpodcast.com as well for more stuff. With that said, hey, this has been a great episode. Look forward to our final few episodes of the 2024 season coming up soon. It's the Orange and Black Soccer Cast, and we are out.
It's the principle of the whole thing. It's principalities in this.